Now that is our editor-at-large, Craig Kapitas, being confronted by police in Panama there. Money Talks finds it's a risky business asking questions about tax havens. Also on the show, an exciting sport, but what is it worth? One American satellite provider drops the NFL, Twitter picks it up and runs with it. And a truly growing industry. Why balding men from all over the world are flying to Turkey. I'm Matthew Moore and this is Money Talks. Now, when the rich and powerful hide their wealth in tax havens, it affects us all. In most cases, their actions are technically legal, even if they do upset the majority of people who simply pay as they earn. But tax havens are also abused by businesses, corrupt officials, and criminals hiding their ill-gotten gains. So, after millions of documents were leaked from the Panamanian law firm Mossack Fonseca, we sent our editor-at-large on the Panama paper trail. All this week, he's been reporting on how offshore tax havens work and how you can open your own shell company. In this final installment of the Panama Paper Trail, Craig looked at why outraged politicians are still reluctant to put the brakes on the offshore system.
The one certain crime in the Panama Papers scandal is the theft and distribution of a law firm's confidential documents. But pay no attention to the men behind the curtain. Only 27 of the 167 governments listed on Transparency International's corruption register qualify as full democracies. And all of those governments either sanction the creation or the use of offshore financial structures their elected officials are now rushing to condemn as criminal enterprises. Our voyage into the genesis of the Panama Papers has illustrated another inconvenient truth about the environment. There's no real distinction between politics and crime, just degrees of separation. And for the so-called 99%, that's the most troublesome fact in the Panama Papers.
The federal government in March announced that it was going to take a really hard look at mysterious shell companies buying luxury properties. I'd say we've now attracted a much more kind of white-collar criminal or element, people whose money, if they've been in trouble, it's, in the gray area. They're operating in the nexus of business and politics.
Pluck as many feathers as you can from the goose. That was the advice French finance minister Jean-Baptiste Colbert offered King Louis XIV in 1668, when tax receipts could no longer bankroll government waste and abuse. Modern economists have a term to define the 21st century's featherless flock, the precariat, a new and burgeoning global class of people insecure in their jobs, communities, and life in general, a place where the only certainty is income inequality.
It must be okay to ask those questions.
The more than 11 million pages of revelations contained in the Panama Papers have caused the precariat to hiss with resentment. Yet it seems clear that elected officials must first accept the responsibility and pay the price for engineering the system that gave us the Panama Papers.
Well, Craig is back from his Panama Odyssey, back with us in the studio here in Istanbul. Craig, we saw at the top of the program you getting into a bit of bother with the Panamanian police. Can you just explain why that was?
Well, it was a close encounter of the first kind. Fact. It is potentially against the law to ask questions about financing in Panama, about clients. How grievous is this? Well, the journalists involved at the consortium that initially leaked was involved in the leakage of the Panama Papers have been advised by their lawyers not to go to Panama. Nick, a colleague of mine from the Miami Herald, who you saw there, the lawyers at the Herald said, don't go. So the moment we got off the plane and started asking questions about this, we were legally in jeopardy.
It doesn't make people at home feel any better about this entire thing. Speaking of which, the precariat, there's a term you used there. Tell us more about that.
It's a word you're going to be hearing a lot more about in the coming months and years. It's a new class of people, the economists say. The precariat is what the middle class is growing into. You have the very poor and the very rich. And you have slices of the middle class and the very poor, they're just disenfranchised. They have no hope. This is not a question of socialism, communism, Marxism, the usual political textbook of terms. This is a new term to define a group of people who live from paycheck to paycheck.
And they feel very separated, don't they, from the elite, you know, the powerful politicians, the businessmen, the financiers. But it's exactly those groups that keep this system going, and they don't seem to want to change it.
They don't. And we've had this discussion before, Matthew, on and off camera. You sometimes say to me, Craig, you're being cynical. And then I say, no, I'm being realistic, and we have this back and forth. I'm not being cynical here, Matthew. I'm being realistic. The politicians are just not going to change it, and one must wonder if they have the money and the resources to change it.
Because, of course, tracking them down, the tax evaders and so on, is so expensive. Now, Craig, thank you very much for all of your reports this week. Appreciate it. But we're going to now turn to the business world more broadly, and the 60 seconds for all the headlines from around the globe. Mitsubishi Motors will pay $600 million to compensate owners of 4 of its models. The company earlier admitted to cheating in mileage tests. The money is intended to cover extra fuel costs for car owners. Brexit worries are good news for gold owners. The price of the safe asset is going up. The weak global economic outlook is also helping drive up prices. The cost of gold has soared by 3.5 times in the past 16 months alone. Microsoft is turning its attention to marijuana. The tech giant says it will help governments track legalized versions of the drug, cultivation to sales. The move is expected to build support for medical marijuana and regulated sales of cannabis. And Brazil's tourism minister, Enrique Alves, has resigned less than 2 months before the opening of the Olympics. Alves is one of the many political leaders in Brazil who have been implicated in the country's biggest ever corruption scandal. Now, in today's Winners and Losers, we're looking at American football and the big world of the NFL. But before we go and look at the numbers, for those who are not familiar with American football, just take a look at some of the fans. Well, it's big business, and TRT World sports presenter Samantha Johnson is here, so it must be serious. Samantha, what's going on then?
Oh, it is very serious indeed. Well, the season might not be underway quite yet, but the drama has certainly begun and is playing across the homes in the United States. Now, if you're a Dish subscriber in the US and had to tune in to the NFL Network on Thursday night, you would have been greeted by this message. Now, the NFL Network is a channel for all things American football and has around 70 million subscribers, making it the most popular sport on television in the US. But Dish has decided not to renew its contract with the channel, suggesting that the offer wasn't good value for its customers. The NFL Network currently costs $1.40 a month, which isn't the most expensive subscription available, but it isn't the cheapest either. But when talking about TV rights, the NFL is in a league of its own. Last season saw an average viewership of more than 75 million people per week across the networks, bringing in more than $6 billion for the NFL. But now that Dish are dropping out, who are the winners and the losers? Well, the biggest losers are the 7 million customers who were subscribed to the NFL Network through the Dish Network. But now they found themselves looking elsewhere for their Thursday night football fix. But the winners are clearly going to be CBS and NBC, who back in February paid $900 million for the rights to show the next 2 seasons' Thursday night games. And now there could be an extra 7 million NFL-hungry customers up for grabs.
OK, got it, Samantha. Thank you very much. That's the TV and the NFL bit out the way. Now let's turn to the Twitter part of this story. Now, the other possible winner is Twitter, as we just said, the social media platform. Now, let's take a look at why. Back in April, the company signed a $10 million deal with the NFL to live stream 10 Thursday night football games. It's the biggest venture by the social media company into the world of sports broadcasting, and it's reported that Twitter's asking advertisers for up to $8 million for packages, including 30-second advertising slots on the platform. So let's take a closer look at this now with Nathan Edelsberg. He's the chief executive editor of the social TV blog Found Remote. And he joins me now from Las Vegas via Skype. So before we get into any potential effect of Dish's decision, just tell us why Twitter is so interested in the NFL.
Yeah, I think Twitter is at a pivotal moment in its business history where it's really relying on major content. When it first launched, it was a huge part of live TV, but then as it evolved, it had some user growth issues. But now that it bid successfully for the NFL, a major sports network in the US, it's trying to save itself, help spur growth, and really make sure that people are using the social network. And it's a big moment for the NFL too, because they're showing that they no longer need to rely on traditional distribution to A, make money, and B, get viewers to see their games. So I think based on the fact that the NFL is no longer going to be on Dish, to them isn't a big deal anymore because of the state of the internet, because of the state of TV, and the fact that you're going to be able to go to Twitter without logging into anything and watch the game from pretty much any device, regardless if you have Dish or not.
Nathan, we've seen reports that Twitter asked for up to $8 million for advertising packages to go alongside their NFL feeds. Is there really that much money to be made on Twitter?
I think there is that much money to be made on Twitter. I think that, the internet and the social web, it's still in its infancy. So even though Twitter often gets a lot of criticism with their stock price not being as good as people would hope, I think they're at an experimental phase, and any tech company has to constantly try new things. So I think Twitter is being bold, it's being lean, and it's taking a big risk by spending all this money on it. But I think they've developed a unique advertising platform for television that's already been working. Twitter has been working with the NFL and TV networks for years now. And this is going to be a really big way to show the world that you can spend as an advertiser in a unique way. The risk, though, is that now that they're actually showing content and not just supporting it with complimentary advertising, will an NBC and CBS actually want to still work with them when they're kind of competing with them?
Got you. Nathan Edelsberg, thank you very much for joining us via Skype in Las Vegas. Now, plenty more coming up after the break here on Money Talks. Another blow to Venezuela's economy. Find out why Lufthansa has joined other airlines flying out of the country. If you're thinking about buying a house in Germany, you will want to see our BIZ Q&A. And we take you behind the scenes of Turkey's $1 billion hair transplant industry.